If you're not already subscribed to this YouTube channel, go ahead and hit the subscribe button now, along with the bell icon so you can be notified whenever a new video is posted. And if you're already subscribed, check and make sure that YouTube hasn't unsubscribed you. And of course, be sure to give the video a like as well as share it on your social media. The white supremacists hate that. And now, the Sunday address. Yeah, it's 2025, and we're going to start the new year off right by rededicating ourselves to the proposition of putting ourselves first, getting comfortable with everyone else being uncomfortable, because that's what it means to be uncompromising. Dr. John Henry Clarke talked about exercising the essential selfishness of survival, and how everybody else does it, and that being the case, we're going to have to get used to this new reality. So I'm going to preface this Sunday address by saying that when a person, or in this case an entire group, has become used to and indeed is utterly dependent on a corrupt social order for their prosperity, and when their identity is also even more dependent on you being beneath them, there is no slow and safe way for you to change that paradigm that's not going to make them feel threatened. Because that's what black folks have been trying to do for 150 years. If only we can do this slow and steady, try to find a nice way to, there's no nice way to change a rotten system. That's what we've been trying to do, and it doesn't work. You see how angry people have become with us over the issue of reparations? The fact that we're bringing it up, the fact that it had traction getting mentioned in the media, and worst of all, it wasn't just being completely and thoroughly dismissed. There were places actually trying to put on a sham of, oh, we're actually going to do this reparations thing. That horrified people. It shocked them. Why? Because they've been dependent on a rotten racial social order, and they need it. You don't, but they do. This is all about getting what we're owed, but you're not going to do that and make people happy. You better get used to that idea. Douglas Murray, a shill for the Manhattan Institute, once wrote a piece calling reparations an act of revenge. Now, of course, you notice nobody ever says that Holocaust reparations was an act of revenge. And that has been the greatest single payout to a wronged group in human history. You have the U.S. spending untold millions of dollars on it in the United States for an incident that happened in Europe. But nobody ever says that's revenge. Nobody ever says that Japanese reparations was revenge, or Native Americans getting tax-free this or that, casinos and bingo loot, etc. Nobody says that's revenge. And none of those groups suffered anywhere near as much as black Americans have. We have suffered orders of magnitude beyond anyone in human history. And yet when we are demanding what we are owed, when we say that it's time to start bringing people to justice, oh, that's just revenge. When it comes to literally any and every other group of people on earth, they can have little or no justifiable claim to anything, and it will still be treated as valid. But black people can have photos, documentation, eyewitness testimony, audio, video, printout, and we're the only ones who consistently get told, well, there's something wrong with you even mentioning that this happened. The Germans and other countries have paid Holocaust reparations, and nobody even questions why that's still going on in the 21st century. Nobody would dare cast aspersions on that. Everyone is entitled to bring up their past wrongs that have been done to them. They're entitled to call out the people who did it, even when they've gotten reparations for decades. But black Americans are the only group who get attacked and told that we need to get over it. Well, you can't get over something if you're still having to deal with it today. But we all know why the propagandists like Murray are scared of reparations. It represents a threat to the racial order that his white paymasters and he himself depend on. Douglas Murray isn't even American, by the way, he's British. Why is a white man in Britain even running his ignorant mouth about something in the U.S. that doesn't concern him, doesn't affect him, and has nothing to do with him, and he won't have to pay anything for it anyway? Why the heck is he so hot and bothered about it? Because he and his racist paymasters know that foundational black Americans are the only ones who are fearlessly and unapologetically standing up to white supremacy, and that we set the tone for the rest of the world. They can hate us as much as they want, but they still imitate us. And this includes black people from the Caribbean and Africa and even these other non-black groups. They all got something snide to say about us, but they know that we're the only people acting and thinking for ourselves, and that's irresistible, even if you hate the people doing it. So when folks see us raising hell about an issue, it puts a spine into everybody else, and that's what Douglas Murray is scared of. There's been some, not a lot, but some black people in the Caribbean and Britain who are actually about that business, and they see us pressing our reparations claim in the belly of the beast. And they suddenly remember that, hey, Britain owes them some chips too. And they start making reparation claims in the islands and in Britain. They need to stop this now. That's what Douglas Murray and his bosses are thinking. But let's understand something. He calls reparations revenge, but only as it pertains to us. Everybody else, well, it's the moral thing to do. Well, these people are owed. Shouldn't they have our sympathy? With black people? No, it's just revenge with them. And it's always been that way. You can go all the way back to the end of the Civil War, people whining about it then. Interesting that he would call it revenge because that's what the Confederacy called it when they lost the Civil War and the leaders of that gang of traitors were being punished, however light it was. They called it revenge by the Yankees. Never mind the fact that their punishment didn't amount to much. They resented and hated the fact that it even happened at all, because white privilege is supposed to mean immunity from the law. That's why. And especially something that has to do with black people. You're not supposed to be punishing them for that. The leaders of Nazi Germany said the same thing at the Nuremberg trials. They called the Nuremberg trials victor's justice. That's what it means. Victor's justice means when the guys who win the war, they just say, we're going to punish you just because. At least that's what they claim it means, as if they hadn't done anything wrong. This is what the remaining Nazi high command was all doing at the Nuremberg trials. They denied intentionally harming anyone, and their foot soldiers on the battlefields and the concentration camps, they all said, well, we were just following orders. Everybody passing the buck and saying, oh, not us. And the leaders of Imperial Japan, when they got put on trial, they said the same things. Everyone saying victor's justice. Never mind the fact that both Imperial Japan and Nazi Germany carried out untold millions of summary executions. Without trial whatsoever, people just being shot because you got in their way, or because you displeased them, or that they felt that you weren't obedient enough. And yet when they were the ones put on trial, that's victor's justice. We're dealing with the exact same mentality here, only on a far, far larger scale. Now, the question for this evening's address is, should we be shying away from that accusation when somebody says, this is just about revenge? Should we curl up into the fetal position and say, no, please don't say that? Or should we clarify it? Reparations or revenge? I have a better question. Why can't it be both? Or rather, why should it not be both? Does justice mean getting even with someone? Is that what it necessarily means? And the answer is yes. Throughout all of human history, whenever criminals have been caught and held to account, their victims have had the moral right to confront them and see them punished as severely as they were wronged. And yet Douglas Murray and his ilk never called that revenge. In the Bible, God said, vengeance is mine and vengeance I shall repay. Now, how many of you ever thought of vengeance as a divine impulse? Justice is the righting of a wrong, and when someone's done wrong, justice of a necessity must have an element of retribution. And in case you didn't know, the etymology of the word retribution comes from two words, re, which means back, and tribuary, which means to pay. So retribution literally means payback. You balance the books. You give back to them what they gave to you. That's justice. And the only people who think of justice as revenge are criminals. See, Douglas Murray is a white man in Britain, and he knows what he would do if somebody had enslaved his forefathers and foremothers and imposed on him an artificial inferior place in the world and had done so for generations without being punished and without him being compensated. He knows exactly what he would do. He would be out for vengeance, which is what every other group has done throughout history when they were wronged and found themselves in a position to do something about it. So understand that, family. Whether it be some two-bit bigot on the other side of the Atlantic or a whole bunch of unwashed racists right here at home, we're not about to let anyone sit here and tell us that they shouldn't be punished. When criminals and the immoral are allowed to get away with their crimes, that is not justice. And if the criminals claim that it's nothing more than revenge, then let them. This isn't a popularity contest. This is about getting what we're owed. When you fall behind on your rent, is it revenge for the landlord to evict you? Now, somebody can feel that that's wrong all they want, but is the landlord within their rights? If they're owed a debt, it has to be paid. Douglas Murray would say no. Well, he would say no if it's a white landlord evicting a black tenant. But we need to understand what it is that we're up against. And the real reasons these other people are opposing reparations, it's not based on law or morality. That's not what their objections are based on, because both the law and morality are on our side. Nobody contests that. So they try to retreat to some asinine deflection about, that was a long time ago, as if there's some statute of limitations on genocide or crimes against humanity. People won't like us getting reparations because they'll claim everyone's having it rough these days. That's the newest talking point du jour. Well, I say, so what? The economic problems right now are nowhere near as bad as they were during the Great Depression, and black people had it the worst during the Great Depression. In fact, we have it bad even during so-called good times. We need to understand and accept the fact that we will get more than a little opposition, not just from people in the dominant society, but also from some empty-headed Negroes trying to go along to get along for their own benefit. Mainly people I'm talking about are those who don't want to make the dominant society feel uncomfortable around them, especially if they think they found a comfortable place under white supremacy. As an example, many years ago, Aaron Magruder, the guy who came up with Boondocks, he was on video speaking some stupid stuff. Basically, he was recycling the old conservative talking point that white people are basically going out of their way if they're being sympathetic with the plight of black people at this point, because it's been so many years since the civil rights movement and black people have not picked themselves up by their bootstraps, etc., etc. There's this ratchet behavior going on. Now, this was years ago. I don't know if he's gotten any smarter, but the fact that he said that at all means he's plumb dumb. First of all, when has white society ever been sympathetic towards us in the first place? Whenever someone talks some stupid stuff like that, your first question to this fool should be, if racism is no longer a major factor in black Americans' lives, then please tell me, what year did racism in America end? Can you give me the year? Can you tell me when slavery stopped, 1865? Can you tell me what year the poll taxes and grandfather clauses were stripped from all legislation, 1965? All right, now tell me what year racism stopped. This is a fool doing their impersonation of what they think a smart person sounds like, but he's the kind of guy the white media love to put out there because he's echoing what it is that they say. This is something that we're going to need to internalize and be on guard against. We've already begun to strip away the little pathetic layers of subterfuge that these bootlicking Negroes in government have had. Now that it's come to a point where votes actually have to be put on the table, you got to go on the record with this stuff, as we saw out in California. Those very black lawmakers, they were the main ones running interference to stop reparations from being passed. They were the ones who acted as the foot soldiers for Gavin Newsom to block it. But they won't be alone. You're going to have a number of Negroes who have been finding themselves on the hot seat with masses saying, you better get out there and talk to these other darkies. And they're going to be the main ones out there saying stuff like, well, is it really necessary? And, there are going to be some black folks who are going to make some unwise investments if you give them reparations. First of all, if you went back to 1865, do you truly believe that if you gave every black person 40 acres and a mule, you would turn around later on and they would be the next J. Paul Getty or the next John Rockefeller? Of course not. The same way that you had Japanese Americans who had the money that they got from their reparations, and for a lot of them, it flowed through their fingers like water. And the same thing goes for Native Americans. There's been untold hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars that's been put into the community from the federal government, and I don't see a shining city on a hill anywhere out there. The point that I'm making is you don't let somebody sit there and say that because a minority within the group may not necessarily invest the money wisely that nobody should get anything at all. Nobody ever does that with any other class action suit or any sort of class action period. Nobody says, well, we got to make sure that none of you guys are going to be unwisely investing whatever. No. You talk to any attorney who's fighting for his clients to be compensated for a wrong done to them, and they'll be the first ones to tell you it is irrelevant whether or not the person is going to be spending it on something or nothing at all or what they do with it. All that matters is they're owed. Full stop. But that talking point about black people spending reparations unwisely, that's something that a number of these bootlicks have done before, and you'll be hearing it again from them, especially as the issue intensifies and grows. It's something that we never hear whenever it's talking about any other group. They only pull out that canard with us, so you better reject that out of hand and do so aggressively. They don't second guess and try to speculate on what these other people would do with the reparations that they get. So why would we allow them to do that with us? The real problem here is not that we're seeking revenge. The main problem I see is angry people who are opponents of reparations. Those are the ones who are angry. That's because in every other arena where they aren't able to stop things from becoming a meritocracy, they see their own monopoly erode and in some cases disappear altogether. I've long told you that white supremacy is a system meant to produce three things for the dominant society: goodies, giveaways, but most importantly, guarantees. And that last one is the most important. That is the social contract, the devil's bargain that white supremacy made with those it classifies as white. Their place in the social economic order must be guaranteed. But they know that this is a house of cards that white supremacy built, so they also require daily reassurance that their position is in no danger of changing. And since they're at the top of this racial pyramid scheme, down is the only change that there can be for them. And no, I don't want to hear a word about whether they have it rough economically. Aaron Magruder can go somewhere and sit down with that mess. We have a system here that was specifically written to benefit them and has done so for hundreds of years at our expense. If they're not set after hundreds of years of governmental and societal largesse, then they never will be, and I can't have sympathy for that. I want the clowns who try to say that black people shouldn't get reparations because some black people might spend it unwisely. I want them to go to white society and ask them what have they done with the hundreds of billions, if not trillions of dollars in wealth that they've received over the centuries. From the Homestead Act to the legal job and government contract discrimination that they've been the beneficiaries of, to veterans from both world wars getting free education, housing loans, and business loans, while black GIs came home from the wars to lynchings, redlining, and job discrimination. The suburbs were built with government money and then reserved only for white people, which meant that black tax dollars built the suburbs. We were not the beneficiaries of any of that. White society got all of that. Okay, and where do they stand today? What have the recipients of white privilege been doing with the largest transfer of wealth in human history? What have they done with it that the majority of them are now complaining about how much in debt they are and how they can't get ahead? See, those are the people who ought to be lectured about how it makes no sense to give them money, not black people. We're the ones who it makes the most sense. When you think about what the U.S. is known for around the world, you know, the stuff that people actually like. It's mostly things that FBA's created and contributed. So investing in us is where the smart money is at, but white supremacy isn't based on logic. It's a system that defies logic and reason in every way imaginable. So I'm afraid that I don't have much sympathy or patience for anybody who tries to show up saying that reparations is a bad thing because it's mean-spirited. No, mean-spirited was slavery, Jim Crow, segregation, the lynchings, church burnings, cross burnings, and every other burnings of people. That's mean-spirited. What we're doing is justice. There's an old saying that success is the best revenge, but when it comes to justice, especially in the metaphysical sense, revenge is the best success. Good evening, and be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors: Shrampstein, Joseph Shorter, Suleiman Alaji, Amir Miller, and Imani Metendaji. Salute to them and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and sharing this message. Black empowerment only exists because of you.